Hello, and welcome to Discover YL. My name is Greg Larson, and I am the Vice President of U.S. Sales Operations. I am so excited to be your host for today because we have an amazing event in store for you. We get to hear from top brand partners, Marcella Von Harding, Anna Cardenas, Sarah Laird, Taylor Quigg, Lizzie Palios, Tanner Hobbs, and Amanda and Brian Cooper. We'll also learn how to approach our wellness holistically from one of our top managers of global training and development, Rita Morrill. But before we dive into all of that, we get to visit one of my favorite Young Living places, the Finca Botanica farm in Chongon, Ecuador. It is an absolute blessing that I have gotten to visit the Finca Botanica farm and the Young Living Academy. When you are there, you get to experience firsthand how amazing our products are. To me, Ecuador is truly the place to fully discover the entire Young Living story. I always say, besides my own home, it is my favorite place on earth. The first time I visited Chongon, Ecuador, was the first time I understood the vision Gary and Mary Young have for their company and the world. So without further ado, it is my absolute joy to introduce Mary Young, our co-founder and CEO.
Welcome to Discover Young Living. This is an exciting moment for me because I'm inviting you to come and discover Ecuador with me at the Young Living Finca Botanica farm. It's a rather interesting, unusual story. Gary was invited by Dr. Edgar Rodas, who was the dean of the Ashway University in Cuenca, Ecuador, to come and build a natural medicine program for the students. Gary had always dreamed of doing something like that. It was exciting for him. And so he was anxious to go. I had to look on the map to see where Ecuador was. I had no idea what to expect, but we packed up and we were going to follow Gary and support him in this dream of his. What Gary discovered is that in Cuenca, they only have a 3-month growing season. And along with the program that he wanted to develop, he wanted to teach them agriculture and how to grow and cultivate and harvest and distill plants for the production of essential oils. One day he came in about 2 months after we'd been there, and he said, Mary, I want to go to Guayaquil over the mountain and see what it looks like there. He came back that night after having a wonderful time here in this city, and he said, Mary, I think you will like it so much better there because the weather's warm and we can grow year round. So the great adventure began. I remember when Gary took me down way into the midst of all of these wild bushes, all of the craziness of it. And he said, Mary, where should we build a distillery? And I kind of rolled my eyes around and just closed them and just pointed into the air. And he said, okay. Well, he built a distillery exactly where I pointed. I was absolutely stunned at what he did. It was fascinating to watch him as he very systematically planned everything out. And of course, he always did his own designs, and we had a drafting table where he drew everything out. So he drew the designs for the distillery, for everything that's here. And then he found the contractors and the people who could build for him. And it just gradually evolved into this most amazing, beautiful, heavenly place in the middle of the jungle. So everybody was really curious to watch and see what this Gary Young was going to do. And he had people come out of the woodwork who said, we don't want you here because you're just Americans and we know you're just coming to see what you can get from us. And one gentleman who came was very angry because his sister was one who had some property who had sold to Gary. And he raised his machete at Gary like he was coming after him. And Gary just looked at him and said, would you like a job? I was standing there and I remember seeing how his face was just so bewildered. He said, I've never had a job. Wouldn't you like to come and work with me? He said, I have to go home and think about it. The next day he came ready to work, and he's the field manager now for Finca. And he and Gary had such a great bonding, loving, wonderful friendship. as Gary had with all of the workers here at the farm. He loved this farm. He loved the earth. He loved getting down in the dirt with them. He loved teaching them things they had never even seen before. He taught Panchito how to operate a tractor, and he'd never been close to a tractor. They didn't know what to think about it. So one by one, he won their hearts over because they saw that he cared about them and he wanted to teach them something. And it just grew and grew and grew. But there was a really funny experience that happened to Gary. He came home one night and he said, "Hey, Mary, you know that funny looking building on the corner of the street before you turn to go to the farm?" And I said, "Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about." He said, "That's a school." And I said, "That's a school?" And he said, "Yeah, and those kids go there. They try to go every day. They have a teacher who comes 2 or 3 times a week. They don't have any electricity. They don't have any water. There's no bathrooms. All they have is a hole in the ground outside. The walls have cracks in them. The floors have cracks in them." He said, "Mary, I want to do something for them. I want to build them a school." And out of that little experience came the beautiful Young Living Academy that we have today. And I remember Andrea, who is the head of the foundation here and is the one who Gary asked if she would take the responsibility of the school, called me on the phone and said, "Mary, we've got almost 80 children who want to come to school. We don't have room." And I said, "We'll just find room." So we divided the great big classrooms in half and created double the classroom space. And we invited more students to come. The school has expanded. And today we have about 350 students. We have a preschool, we have a high school, we have a big, beautiful new kitchen and restaurant that some of our members, came down and helped build. And we have what's called Sponsor a Child program, which means many of you members out there are the sponsors to our students at the school. And it's been so fantastic to receive that kind of support. And I just heard just a few hours ago that one of our graduating students tomorrow is going to Massachusetts, where she's going to enroll in school to start her journey to become a medical doctor. And it's her sponsor who is paying that way for her and giving her that opportunity. We have many, many young students, young graduates who have gone on to higher education. We have one working at the spa here who's in her 2nd year of business. It's so amazing to see how the lives of these children have been changed, but the whole community has changed. Changong used to be a pretty rundown little town with lots of garbage in the streets. Sometimes it's typical of what you might see in remote countries of Latin America, South America. And Gary said, "We're going to do something different." And he bought gloves for all the children at the school and had the workers at the farm come down with the trucks. And he took them on a walk through the town and they gathered garbage. It made such a magnificent impression. People've never seen anything like that. Who would care? But we cared. Our students cared. And even when we returned back to the US, once a year, the students would have their cleanup Changong Day. And they'd put on gloves and the trucks would come from the farm and they go out and clean the roads. Yesterday, when we drove in to Changong and drove through it, I was in awe at how clean it was. There was no garbage in the street. There was not even a pile of garbage anywhere. And all of the entranceways into the little towns were clean. It was so heartwarming to see. And I think, how has that affected them in their lives, in their home, in the way they look at things? The farm has been so spectacular because it's given jobs to so many people. And with all the wildcrafting we do, you may not be aware, but with Palo Santo, we have contracted with villagers to take their trucks and go and gather up the dead wood, because Palo Santo can only be distilled from dead trees, dead branches. In 2011, Gary went to Madagascar to study the ylang-ylang plants. While he was there, he just knew that the climate was so similar that we could grow ylang-ylang plants on our farm here in Ecuador. So when he returned, he found a nursery who could provide the starts, and he planted 24,000 seedlings. By 2013, they had grown into great big bushes, and the flowers were fantastic. We started with just 2 small cookers to distill the flowers. Today, we have over 70,000 trees, and we're distilling in 20 cookers. I love to talk about this farm. I want to tell you about our distillery manager. Eugenio and his wife came from Peru and were working and managing a building that we rented when Gary first started in Cuenca. Gary had started investigating Palo Santo, and he built a very small cooker so he could distill it up there in the highlands. He needed help when Eugenio seemed to have an interest. So Gary started to show him what needed to be done. When Eugenio really took hold of it, he became so interested, and Gary was very impressed with his aptitude. So when we moved to Guayaquil, Gary and I talked about it, and we thought, well, let's take Eugenio and Rosa to Guayaquil with us, which is what we did. We lived in a big house, and Eugenio and Rosa lived on one side, and we lived on the other side, and the kitchen was in the middle, and the living room was in front. And his 2 daughters and our 2 boys rode their tricycles around and around and around in the living room and played together every day. And that's how they developed such a strong bond, and they still today feel like brothers and sisters. Joseph was only 18 months, and I believe Jacob had just barely turned 5. And now Jacob's all grown up and married, and Joseph's 17, 1 more year of high school. Eugenio's had an amazing experience with his children as well, because his oldest daughter, Lisette, is in her 2nd year of college, where she's studying international business. And Nayeli, the 2nd daughter, just graduated from high school, and she's on her way to the United States because her sponsor has invited her to come and live where she can investigate her dream of wanting to become a doctor. It's amazing the many things that have happened. But when I think about how Eugenio and his wife thought they would just come to Ecuador in hopes of earning a small living that they could send the money back to their families in Peru, that has evolved into something far beyond anything they could have ever imagined. Eugenio's been our distillery manager for almost 14 years. And Rosa works in the restaurant, and then she comes and helps me when we're here. We just have a wonderful relationship. It was really fun when Gary decided to bring them to the United States. And many of you perhaps heard them when they spoke at convention. They couldn't even imagine anything so amazing. And now it's just part of their life. But I think it would be a lot more fun for you to hear the story from Eugenio. And Eugenio's just walking out of the distillery. So Eugenio, come and join me.
Hola John Living, mi nombre es Eugenio Carbajulca. Estamos en la finca John Living, Ecuador, cerca del área de destilería. Quiero contarles un poquito acerca de la historia de cómo conocí a Gary en Merion. Hace 15 años atrás, tenía que emigrar de mi país para buscar unas mejores opciones de trabajo y tuve la oportunidad de conocerlo a Mary y Gary. Diría, tuve la bendición de conocerlo. Cuando pude conectar con Gary, obviamente por medio de su traductor, me ofreció un trabajo para trabajar. Y en ese momento me habló de su proyecto que tenía, cómo lo tenía todo en su cerebro, en su cabeza, todo formado. Y me quedé sorprendido, me sorprendió de todo eso, que me hablaba de las plantas aromáticas, me hablaba de los aceites que yo no había conocido en ese momento, me sorprendió hartísimo. Y mostrándome su aceite, wow, me sorprendió. Me contrató, estuve trabajando en Cuenca en unas ollas muy pequeñas, de unos 150 litros aproximados. Pero él siempre me hablaba de la grandeza que tenía que tener en pocos años. Bueno, así fue que en poco tiempo estuvimos en Cuenca trabajando, haciendo experimentos con muchas plantas, y luego pasamos a Guayaquil. En Guayaquil también yo vine con mi esposa. Una partecita que tengo que retroceder decirles, yo vine con mi esposa a buscar unas condiciones de trabajo, dejando a mis dos niñas, que era la Nayeli y Lisette Carvajulca. Bueno, Lisette era en esos tiempos de 3 años, Nayeli tenía aproximadamente 2 años. Pero cuando esto conté a Mary, a Gary, ellos se sorprendieron y me ayudaron profundo. Una ayuda que me dieron para ir a traer a mis niñas, incluso poniendo su propia movilidad para poder pasar la frontera porque éramos indocumentados. ¿Ya? Es una historia muy larga, pero trato de hacerlo un poquito, reducirlo. Entonces, cuando yo vine a Guayaquil, estuvimos trabajando, experimentando. Gary pudo obtener 2 ollas más para procesar palo santo. Luego fuimos investigando otras plantas como ruda y eucalipto azul, ocotea, dorado azul, orégano, mastrante. Fue así entonces como Gary compró su finca, se pasó para acá, se construyó unas ollas de 5 toneladas. Entonces, en ese momento yo acordaba que Gary me decía, esas ollitas para poner al bolsillo, pequeñitas para empezar. Y cuando ya me sorprendí, inmensa. Fue así que tal, poco a poco él, con su traductor y con la ayuda de la señora Mary, me iba contando de sus proyectos que tenía. Como lo repito, todo lo tenía en el cerebro. Entonces me decía él que quería construir una escuela. Eso fue, bueno, en un momento que él conoció una escuelita pues en Chongoncito, y unos niños que donde no tenían donde sentarse, tenían unas mesas, un aula donde eran como 50, 60 alumnos. Entonces, él tuvo ese gran corazón y poner de ese momento un proyecto en su cerebro de construir una escuela. Entonces, él enseguida nos contó y me dijo a mí, mediante Mary, que me traducía, voy a construir una escuela y tus hijas van a estudiar ahí y se van a graduar ahí. ¿Ya? Entonces, ya me sorprendió. Y fue así que en el 2009 su escuela empieza a funcionar, en donde mis hijas, Lisette Carvajulca ya se graduó, ahora estudia en la universidad, va por el 2º año de negocios internacionales. Mi hija Nayeli también ahora ya se graduó del colegio, tiene una oportunidad enorme mediante su sponsor y la ayuda de Mary. Obviamente que no lo tenemos a Gary físicamente, pero lo tenemos acá en nuestro corazón. Y Nayeli va a viajar a Estados Unidos a hacer algo de un trabajo comunicativo para ver por qué ella quiere estudiar medicina. Entonces su sponsor lo va a apoyar. Y esa es una oportunidad grande que da John Living, es la oportunidad más grande que no solamente da a los niños, quizás pueden ser míos, sino a muchos niños de la comunidad de Chongón, de ser competitivo, de seguir adelante, de una parroquia que prácticamente ha estado olvidado y sigue olvidado por el Estado. Pero John Living hizo posible mediante el sueño y la visión de Gary.
Eugenio, that was wonderful to hear your story. Eugenio, you're wonderful, and we all love you, and we appreciate all that you do for Young Living and your dedication. And these members need to know that it's because of Eugenio that we have the Line. He and his crew are extremely dedicated to making sure that they stay up on top of everything. And sometimes, like you said, they have to work all night to keep it going, to get it done. Because there's only a short period of time for being able to extract the oils from the flowers. So we're all grateful to Eugenio, to his family, and for the support and love that they have for Gary, for all of you, for the farm. And it's a great life for them.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mary and Eugenio. What a special treat from a very special place. I find new inspiration every time I hear the humble beginnings of the Young Living story in Ecuador. As you listen to our leaders today, you'll see how Gary's mindset and vision was critical to bringing to life the farm and the academy.